Hello, friends, and welcome to my July stories. So again, I devoured a lot of media this month, so I'm going to get right into the stories I enjoyed, starting with books. I didn't get to read too many books because I decided to get myself immersed into Les Miserables, and I'm going to be honest, it's going to take me a few months at least to get through. It's 1,400 pages, so with everything else I have going on, I'm not going to rush through this book, and that's totally fine. I'm still listening to audiobooks, so I will have at least a little bit to review every single month, and I'm also getting through whatever books I read for my book club, and I try to read them actually physically, so we'll see, but I still got some stories to review for you guys. And by the way, I do apologize for this video being maybe a little bit too late for a wrap-up of July, but at the end of the month I went camping, so obviously it's kind of hard to edit while you don't have any electricity, so I just had to make it now, but next month I'll try to be a little bit more on time. So I'm going to start with the novels that I read for the month, and the first one that I read is Stalking Jack the Ripper by Carrie Maniscalco. The way I feel about this book is interesting because it did not get off to a really good start for me. I understand what the writer was trying to do with feminism, and as a feminist I appreciate it to a degree, but I also don't like when somebody tries to push an important agenda too much. Like, I said it with Wonder Woman, and the reason I actually said it for Wonder Woman was because of this book, is show, don't tell. I don't need to constantly be reminded that this is a woman and how can she be doing these things that men are supposed to be doing. I got it the first 5 times you mentioned it. You don't need to say it on every single page. But I plowed myself through it. I got through it. It was hard for the first half of the book. It was very hard to get through it. But the second half, I was very interested in. I think it really did pick up, especially because of the kind of love interest Thomas. He reminded me a bit of kind of like a Jace of City of Bones, where he's that kind of charming, sarcastic guy. And it's funny because I don't fall for those guys in real life, but in books they are, oh my gosh, they're amazing. So he was what made it really easier for me to get through the book. But then, like I said, the second half just really picked up. So because of that, I give it 3 stars. I gave it a better score than I initially thought because I'm actually intrigued now to read the next book in the series. So she definitely did something right. Next up, I listened to the audiobook of If I Did It, the O.J. Simpson confession or whatever it was supposed to be. I initially had no interest in actually contributing to it in any way until I found out that the Goldman family actually was getting all the proceeds. So I said, well, if OJ's not getting the money for it, and even he's not even technically credited for it, you really have to just know that that's what this story is about. But because he wasn't getting anything off of it, I decided, okay, I'll listen to this story. And I have to say, it is fascinating. It's very disturbing, and it's just to hear the thoughts of a sociopath and how he just, everything that he has to say is about how messed up Nicole was, and he was such a loving husband. It's just everything, his side of the story is obviously just the opposite of everything that you've heard. And, you know, it gets to the point of the night in question, as the chapter is called, and I just listened to it and I just said, why would an innocent person write this? Why would you say this is hypothetical and then go into what you would have done if you were actually guilty? It's mind-boggling to me, and it's very interesting. It's hard for me to rate it because of the subject matter, but I give it a 3 because it's in the middle. I feel bad for giving it a really good rating, and I wouldn't say that it's like a great book, but it's very interesting, especially if you're interested in the mind of a killer. I do recommend it if that's something that interests you. If you followed any of my attempts at BookTube, then you saw a couple of books that I read, and I did not get through as much as I would have liked. But now that I understand kind of what to expect, I'm really hoping that next year I can do much better, because I would really like to challenge myself and actually accomplish some of the challenges. But I did accomplish 2. One of them is The Wicked and Divine by Karen Gillan. This book is fantastic. It is so intriguing. I love the character. If you didn't catch my TBR, it's about these gods who come down to Earth every 90 years and they just kind of have fun on Earth and they cause some havoc. And it's really interesting, the dynamic that they're like pop stars. It's a metaphor for how our pop stars have kind of become godlike almost to us. It's just so interesting. The Lucifer character is surprisingly a female. The art in it is beautiful. I love this book. It won't be long before I read the next volume because this book is fantastic. I definitely give it 5 stars. I will warn you that there is a bit of graphic violence and some sexual material, so if that makes you uncomfortable, you might want to skip it. But if you're okay with it, it's a fantastic read. Especially if you, obviously, if you like graphic novels, this is one that you should definitely be picking up. The next book that I read, and this was what I made my book monster out of, was Harley Quinn, Welcome to Metropolis by Carl Kessel and Terry Dodson. For the most part, there's a lot of stories with different artists. There was one story where they're like 3 different artists and every other page alternated, and it was very strange. This book took me forever. I thought, oh, I'll just easily get through it, and I didn't realize it's basically like 2 graphic novels in one. It's 11 issues, where most trades are 5 or 6. There were some things that were funny. This was the first time I ever read a story with Bizarro, and he was hilarious, and I can't wait to come across more stories with him because he's just super fun. But I was bored with a lot of it. It's not as fun as the last Harley Quinn book that I read, Preludes and Knock Knock Jokes. So I'm giving it like a 2.5. I don't even know if it should be that high, but there were things in it that I did like, and it's not the worst book I've ever read, but it's definitely not on like my priority of recommended reading. So unfortunately, those were the only books that I got through this month. Really disappointed that Booktubeathon I couldn't get more through, but like I said, next year I think I'm just gonna go in ready to just beat this year me up with reading. So movies, I only saw, that I can remember, I only saw one older film. Everything else was in the theaters this month. But what I did watch, that was an older movie, was back to kind of the theme of last month, went back and watched the Friday the 13th remake. And it does not deserve the flack that everybody gives it. I was really happy with this movie. I've seen a lot of horror now, and it's very hard for me to be scared. And this one made me scream more than once. And it was because I think this film was better at building suspense than any other Friday the 13th movie. And there were some like cheesy moments, like the way that Jason gets the mask, I was a little upset with. But overall, I was very pleased with it. I think that a lot of people don't give it enough credit. If you are interested in it, I think it's worth watching. It was honestly, to me, the scariest Friday the 13th movie I've seen. I think that's saying a lot. And then, as I've already mentioned, I saw quite a few new releases for the month, except for maybe like the Emoji Movie. We saw almost everything, and why would we see the Emoji Movie? So the first movie that we saw was Baby Driver, and I'm very torn about how I feel about this movie. I thought it started off really great. There was some really, really good filmmaking elements to it, especially at the beginning when he's dancing down the street and all the lyrics show up as graffiti on the walls. I absolutely loved that. The trailers did not grip me at all. I walked in not really expecting much from the movie, and then when that opening scene started, I was like, okay, and then I was a little bit more open to it, and I started to really get interested and follow along, and I was really invested in this character's story. But when it got to the third act of the film, it started to lose me. It felt like a totally different movie. It was a little bit extreme and kind of unbelievable as compared to everything else. Like, I understand action movies having this amount of disbelief, and that's fine, but I didn't feel like it was unrealistic to begin with, so it was just a very dramatic shift. But I did really enjoy a lot of it, and I don't think it was a bad movie. I think if you did like the trailer, I do think it's worth seeing. I only gave it 3.5 stars. I don't know, maybe if I see it again, I might like it a little bit more, so also take that into consideration when listening to my review. And the next movie that we saw was SpiderMan Homecoming, and this movie made me very happy. I'm one of those people who likes pretty much every Spider-Man movie that comes out. I don't really care who played him. Oh, I think Tobey Maguire is probably the least interesting Peter Parker, but even at that, I still like him. Spider-Man 3 is not the best, but watching it again, I have a better appreciation for it. I just love Spider-Man. He's one of my favorite superheroes. So in general, I'm going to go into a Spider-Man movie and like it a lot, and this movie was no exception. I think Tom Holland is a fantastic Spider-Man, and I hope so badly that we get to see this Spider-Man actually grow up, because we've always just seen him as a rookie. I want to see him fight the Sinister Six and have a shot. I thought Iron Man was in it a little bit too much, but at the same time, he's a new superhero. He does need somebody to kind of guide him. So it made sense, and Michael Keaton was fantastic. I think he was possibly the best Spider-Man villain. The only person I think he's really in competition with is Doc Ock, Alfred Molina. Also fantastic. There's this scene where, I'm not going to say any spoilers, but just the way that it was lit, and he was lit by the stoplights, and you'll know what I'm talking about if you've seen the movie, and it changes colors, and he looks so sinister. He's a fantastic actor. He really sold the movie for me. If it was another actor, I don't know. I still would have liked it because it was Spider-Man. But I'm just saying, he was amazing. But overall, great movie, 4.5 stars. Go see it if you have not. The next movie that we saw was Valerian, and I don't even really want to go into it that much. I did not like this movie. I want to give Luc Besson some credit for trying. There are some nice visual things that he did with the movie, but the two leads were awful. They had some of the worst chemistry I've ever seen in a movie. I didn't understand why this was supposed to be a love story at all. I had no interest in love story. I actually voluntarily fell asleep for I don't know how long, 10 minutes, half hour. I couldn't tell you. I was just completely not invested in it. I understand that like all of the creatures are supposed to be from different planets, but to me, like it didn't feel like it was all designed by the same person. It looked to me like this creature was designed by this guy. This creature was designed by this guy. And there was no cohesiveness. I understand, like I said, different planets, you're going to have different creatures, but I just wanted to feel like I was in this one universe. Like Star Wars. All these aliens look different, but they all look like they belong in the same universe, that they would realistically run into each other. I just didn't get that from the design. So I give the movie 1.5 stars, and that's being generous, and that's only because, like I said, Luc Besson did do some good things with it visually, and I mean directing, shot choices. That was pretty much the only smart thing to the movie. It was a huge failure to me. Next, we saw Dunkirk, and this is another movie that I liked, but there was a thing that didn't work for me, and that's the fact that the movie is told in a non-linear fashion. I have a problem with it because there's no reason for it, and it's really confusing. I like that the movie just drops you right into the story. There's no exposition, no explanation. You just have to follow along, and there's a little bit of text, but otherwise, they don't have a bunch of characters explaining what the situation is and where they are. You're just in there and boom, 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 and then everything is intense. I think that worked really well. But because they don't explain to you anything about the story, you're sitting there wondering what's going on almost, because it's told out of order. And you don't even realize that it's told out of order until a specific moment, halfway through the movie. And I just didn't think that it worked. It felt like a gimmick rather than a practical storytelling effect. But otherwise, I thought the performances obviously were solid. I mean, we have Kenneth Branagh, Mark Rylance, Cillian Murphy, and Tom Hardy, who I almost felt was a little bit of a waste just because, we barely see him, and he's, kind of a big actor. I don't know if he's, the biggest, but a lot of people love him, and I felt like it was kind of a waste for him, but he was still good, and it was a very solid movie. Like I said, it was super intense. Another thing that kind of lost some points for me was that the main character, the soldier kid, I don't know, is that Harry Styles? I don't know, he was one of those kids, I think. I didn't care about that character at all. I thought he was kind of a piece of crap, but it was a war story, so I was still interested, and it was a good movie, so I give it a 4 stars. I think it's definitely worth seeing, especially just for the intensity. A lot of people say it's different for a Nolan film, different for a war film, and I agree with both of those statements. And then the final movie that I saw, War for the Planet of the Apes. This one was good, it's well done. I do recommend it to people, but personally, it was just too slow. There was a lot just kind of really long scenes that were drawn out. It might have been that there were some very kind of realistic war things. There was like callbacks to kind of like triggers you, like slavery and like Holocaust things, which I thought was interesting for a war movie. But like when the movie's long, it can be hard to watch, especially like you're going into the Planet of the Apes expecting an action movie, and it's just super intense. And I'm okay with seeing intense movies, I really am, but it was too long, I think. And then they threw in this character who was supposed to be like comic relief, and I didn't feel like it needed him, but I did still think it was really well made. All the Planet of the Apes movies are really good. Just because I can acknowledge that it's such a good film, I give it 4 stars. I do think it's worth seeing, especially if you like the original, you want to see the series wrap up. I think it is a good conclusion to the series. It's an intriguing story. It was just a little bit too long for me. So that's going to do it for my wrap-up of everything that I enjoyed story-wise for the month of July. Be sure to comment below with what stories you enjoyed the month or didn't enjoy, because I like talking about those too. And just be sure to keep enjoying stories until I see you again.